All right. I'd like to continue our discussion for EAR application. All right. So earlier we discussed the first application, which is actually for mortgage analysis. Okay. So in the real world, there are many different kinds of mortgages. They may come with different points, different fees. So all you need to do is to actually calculate the EAR for different mortgages and compare the EAR. All right. If you're actually taking out mortgages, you pick the one that has the lowest EAR. All right. So if you want to calculate EAR, you follow our examples and you focus on the cash flow, and you get the IRR, convert that into APR and EAR eventually. All right. So here I'm going to discuss the second application, which is actually for analyzing leasing versus buying. Okay. So EAR application number 2. All right. So in many cases, you can actually, for instance, lease, a book, or you can buy a book. You can lease a, airplane or buy an airplane. All right. Aircrafts are really expensive. So the question of leasing versus buying is really having a lot of, importance, for, let's say airline companies. All right. So I'm going to get started with one simple example here. This is actually example number 8, and I'm going to show you how we can actually apply EAR to the analysis of leasing versus buying. Okay. All right. So again, please have your lecture note on your side, for easy reference. All right. So example number 8. All right. You need a new computer, but you cannot decide whether you should buy it or you should lease it. All right. So the computer costs $4,000. All right. The lessor, well, in this case, you're talking about the lessor and the lessee. All right. The lessor is the party that actually rents out, for instance, the computer. The lessee is the party that actually get to rent and use the computer. You have to pay the monthly leasing fee and so on and so forth. All right. So in this case, the lessor is the neighborhood computer leasing company. All right. This company offers to lease you the computer for $1,500 per year. All right. And of course, the condition is that you make 4 payments of $1,500 each time. The first one is actually due at the start of the lease, which is actually time point 0. All right. And then you have 3 more leasing payments of $1,500 at the end of years 1, 2, 3. Okay. And based on the past experience, you know that if you're going to you will keep your new computer for about 3 years. Okay. If you buy the computer, you will keep it. All right. Additional fact is you can borrow from your bank at 15%. So if you want to buy the computer, if you don't have the money, you borrow, and if you borrow, you pay 15%. All right. So the question is, you want to buy or lease? Okay. So let me just transcribe the question into Excel. Computer cost is 4,000. All right. If you buy, interest rate for getting a loan is actually 15%. Okay. If you lease, okay, you actually pay, if leasing, all right, you have 4 leasing installments of $1,500 each time. All right. And actually it's, starting immediately. Okay. So the question is, all right, and the horizon we're talking about here is actually 3 years. Okay, horizon is actually 3 years. Okay, so the question is, you want to buy or lease the computer? All right, so let's analyze this a little bit. Okay, so apparently, if you want to decide whether you should buy or lease, you should consider the cost of buying versus leasing. All right, if the cost of buying is higher, you go for leasing. If the cost of leasing is higher than the cost of buying, then you go for buying. All right. So the question is, how do you measure the cost? Okay, so some of you may immediately realize that what, this actually is a little similar to the mortgage analysis, because in that application we're talking about measuring the cost of mortgages by using EAR. So the thought is, can we also measure the cost of buying or leasing by EAR? And if so, can we actually calculate the EAR for buying, EAR for leasing, and then we can actually decide. All right, so that is exactly what we're going to do next. Okay, and if I want to actually, analyze this, I might want to put these options, side by side. All right, so the first option is buying, the second option is leasing. All right, if I want to actually understand the cost of buying or the cost of leasing, I might want to focus on the cash flows for these two options. Okay, so I'm going to have the timeline here. In this case, I'm going to have a vertical timeline because I'm putting the buying option and the leasing option side by side. So it makes sense for us to have a vertical timeline here, right? So I have 3 periods here or 3 years here. If you buy the computer, well, you pay 4,000, all right? And that's the only cash outflow. Okay, some of you will say, hey, what happens in at the end of year 3? Well, here for simplicity, let's just assume at the end of year 3 the computer is worthless. Okay, so in other words, the residual value of the computer at the end of year 3, that is 0. All right, maybe we can justify this assumption to some extent. Okay, this is a computer, so we know that electronics, they actually depreciate over time, and it might be reasonable to assume that this computer is going to become useless after 3 years. Okay, later on we're going to look at what happens if the equipment, or if the the car or the airplane is still worth a lot for money at the end of the horizon you're looking at. Okay, now if you lease the computer, so what are the cash flows? If you lease the computer, you're going to pay $1,500 today. That is immediately payable. All right, and then you're going to pay $1,500 at the end of the following 3 years. So you have 4 installments of $1,500 each time. All right, so now this is the cash flow from buying. This is the cash flow from leasing. These are actually negative, saying these are cash outflows. You're actually incurring the cost of buying versus leasing the computer. All right, so now what should we do? Okay, well, as I said, we assume there's no residual value for the computer in 3 years if you buy the computer. So that is one assumption we're making here implicitly. All right, so now, I want to actually look at some kind of difference between these two cash flows. All right, and I'm going to call this differential cash flows. Okay, some of you might be turned off by this name here. So this name is called differential cash flow, but really it's nothing but, all right, the cash flow from leasing option minus the cash flow from buying option. Okay, so you see that if you lease the computer, you pay $1,500. If you buy the computer today, you pay $4,000. So the difference is negative $1,500 minus negative $4,000. So that's $2,500. And I'm going to do this for the other cash flows in the other periods as well. Okay, so now let's think about this for a second. All right, you're looking at the differential cash flow, and you start to think, if I go with the leasing option, then today it saves me $2,500, right? Because if I lease, I have to pay $1,500. But if I buy, I have to pay $4,000. So if I'm going with the leasing option, I'm saving $2,500 today. But that saving actually comes at a cost. The cost is that you have to actually pay $1,500 in the following 3 years. Okay, another way to actually think of this differential cash flow is to think of this as a loan. All right, so this is very, very important. So please listen up. All right, this is actually regarding the interpretation for the differential cash flows. So we're saying If you are willing to lease, that is like you are willing to take out a loan for $2,500, and in return you're going to pay off the loan by making 3 installments of $1,500 in the following 3 years. So the question is, are you willing to take out such a loan? And the answer apparently depends on how expensive is this loan. If this loan is really, really expensive, I don't want to take out this loan. If I don't want to take out this loan, that's like I'm not willing to lease. Okay, so that's the interpretation. All right, so let me just put this down here. Interpretation of the differential cash flows. All right, so really the leasing option is translated to, taking out a loan of $2,500 and paying off the loan by making 3 equal installments of $1,500 in the following 3 years. Okay, so that is translating the leasing option. All right, so if you're willing to lease, that's like you're willing to take out such a a loan. If you're not willing to lease, then you don't want to take out this loan. All right, so the question is, how expensive is this loan? All right, so I want to actually measure the cost of this loan, because this really tells me how costly the leasing option is. All right, so the loan cost, all right, so the loan cost can be measured by the IRR of the differential cash flows. Okay, so now we start to actually realize that this is yet another application of the IRR. Okay, so I'm going to look at IRR. Before I can look at IRR, I have to look at IRR of the differential cash flows. Okay, so I'm going to actually calculate IRR here. So this is equal to IRR. Notice that the cash flow starts as positive, and then it changes to the negative, and it stays negative. So there's only one IRR here. All right, so I'm just going to look at all these cash flows, and yes, this IRR is actually 36%. Okay, so this is really a very expensive loan. All right, so now I can actually say, what is the APR of the differential cash flows, or really this is the cost of leasing in APR terms. All right, so what I'm going to do here is very straightforward. I'm going to multiply this by the compounding frequency parameter, which is 1 here. You're making annual payments, all right, and the IRR of leasing, which is the cost of leasing, and I'm going to do the effective function here one more time. All right, so I take the APR, I put down 1 here for the compounding frequency parameter, and that is 36%. Okay, this loan is absurd. This loan is so expensive. So now the question here is, what is the IRR of buying? Well, the IRR of buying, if you buy this computer, you're going to borrow, and if you borrow, you pay 15%. So that is the quoted rate from the loan. So if I want to calculate the IRR for buying, I'm just going to look at 15% quoted rate. That is the APR, and I want to use the same annual compounding frequency. So that is the IRR for buying. So the conclusion is very straightforward. All right, IRR for leasing is 36%. IRR for buying is only 15%. So yes, you should actually buy the computer. Okay, because it's much cheaper for you to buy. All right, in some cases, it makes sense for you to actually model your assumption, especially later when we want to actually use the data table. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually show you how we can actually model this conclusion by using the Excel if function. All right, so I'm going to look at the cost of leasing, and I'm going to compare this to the cost of buying. So this is a logical test. All right, in this context, this logical test is true. If this is true, then basically the cost of leasing is higher than the cost of buying. So I'm going to say buy. All right. So I want Excel to return this value if the logical test is true. Now, on the other hand, if the logical test is false, maybe in some other context, this logical test is false. If that's, not true, then essentially the cost of leasing is actually lower. So I should say lease it. Okay. All right. So that is my, if function. And I just messed up the single, quotation sign there. So let me just put this back. And yes, this is actually modeling, all right, the conclusion by using the if function. Okay, so this could be useful, on many occasions. All right, so just to recap, in this simple example, we're trying to actually compare buying to leasing. And our methodology is to look at the differential cash flows. And we do have a very good interpretation of the differential cash flows. All right. So this differential cash flow is effectively translating the leasing option into a loan. Okay. If you're willing to go for this loan, then you're willing to lease because you want to save, because you want to actually have the $2,500 loan or the cash inflow today. All right, so that is, a very simple demonstration. Some of you will wonder, can I actually look at the dollar cost of buying versus the dollar cost of leasing? Well, the answer is, of course. You can actually look at, I don't, suggest, you do it this way, but in case some of you are still interested, you can actually go about this approach. Okay, so compare the dollar cost of buying versus leasing. All right. So, this is actually, fairly straightforward. If you want to, buy, you're just going to have, $4,000. And if you want to lease, well, you're going to actually pay, 3 installments. And so I'm just going to look at the present value of buying. Well, that's just one-time cash of 4,000. And I want to look at present value of leasing. Well, the leasing actually comes in the format of a multiple cash flow. So I need to actually, model this multiple cash flow. And this is a very simple timeline. So I'm just going to manually type in the numbers. All right. So the cash flow, or I should say leasing payment per period. So today that's 1,500 and you're going to make 3 more leasing payments. So present value of each leasing payment. All right, so I'm going to actually look at the present value of each, and we don't have a discount rate here, but notice that if you're going to buy this, you have to pay 15%. So that's your opportunity cost, and that's your financing cost. So maybe I can actually make a case that this 15% is also appropriate if I want to discount the $1,500. Okay. So that's the present value of the first leasing payment. And I just built a strong formula and copied across. Okay. Present value of all leasing payment. All right. So I'm just going to add up all these present values. And if I look at all this, and that would be $4,924.84. So yes, present value of leasing is greater than present value of buying. So we actually arrive at the same conclusion. All right, it still makes sense for you to actually buy. Okay. All right. So that is example number 8, and this is a very straightforward application of using EAR to measure the cost of buying versus leasing. All right. So I like to emphasize that in this example, we are actually making a few implicit assumptions. The first one here is there is no tax. Okay. This is because you might be doing this computer purchase or computer leasing for your home, for your private use. All right. If you're doing this for corporations, you can actually involve tax, and tax can actually play a very important role here. later in capital budgeting chapter, we're going to discuss, how we deal with tax. Okay, and then there's another assumption about operational equivalence. So, you're buying a computer. So if the computer goes wrong, you fix it. All right. If you lease the computer, well, if you lease the computer, if the computer goes wrong, maybe the leasing company, will fix it. But, from our, perspective, we're assuming, operationally, these two options are equivalent. Okay. In real world, if you have to, fix the computer, if you don't know how, you may have to incur cost of having somebody fix it for you. All right, that is, that can change the game. All right, and there is no residual value. As I said, the computer is worthless at the end of year 3. All right, but you can realize that, if the computer is actually worth something, well, that's going to even, that's going to make the, buying option even more attractive, because you actually get something back. We know already that in this case, buying is a better option. So if you actually get something back, if you buy the computer in 3 years, then you can actually, realize, buying option is actually a bit more attractive. Okay, so we are, making these implicit assumptions. All right, so now let's look at example number 9. This is the last example in this IRR, APR, and EAR discussion. Okay, all right, example number 9. All right, again, please have your lecture note, on your side. All right, you decide to get a new car. Okay, so this is about a car problem. All right, you can either lease the car or you can buy it. All right, if you decide to buy the car, you can finance the purchase with a 3% bank loan. If you lease the car, well, you have the following options. All right, so let's look at the parameters in this example here. First of all, MSRP for the car. This is actually $24,500. Okay. And you have very good negotiation skills. All right, so you negotiate with the dealers and you say, all right, I'm only willing to pay this. Okay, it's take it or leave it offer. All right, if you can make it happen, we have this deal. All right, so the negotiated price, that is actually 22,490. Okay. All right, and in the context of car leasing business, this 22,490, that's actually referred to as the capitalized cost. Capitalized cost. Okay, all right. So that's the term people use, and the dealer says, I have to charge you a destination charge. The destination charge is effectively, you live in Connecticut and the factory is actually in, let's say, South Carolina. So it's a brand new car. So they have to ship the car from South Carolina to Connecticut and you pay for the shipping. All right. And this is actually $415. Okay. And, if you want to actually buy, then you pay this total. All right. 22,490 plus the 415, whatever that is. All right. And if you lease the car, all right, total purchase price, well, that's going to be the summation of these two things, okay? All right, so that's $22,905. All right, now if you lease the car, okay, what's going to happen here? All right, so the dealer says, if you want to lease, you pay $1,315 at the signing of the lease. Okay. All right. So cost at signing. Okay. That's $1,315, and you start to ask, why do I have to pay this much? Well, the dealer says, this actually is broken down into the following. All right. First of all, destination charge. Okay. It doesn't matter whether you buy or lease. You're going to pay the $415, all right? And, you go to other dealers, that's the same price, okay? And, you also have the so-called acquisition fee, okay? So I'm a dealer. I have to acquire this car for you because that's what you want. So I'm paying you, I'm charging you $450. And then you also have the security deposit, okay? And that's going to be another $450. And notice the dealer says the security deposit, well, that's actually refundable. All right. So if you honor this lease, at the end of the lease, you can actually get your 450 back. So if you want to actually look at the total, that's 1315. Okay. So that's the breakdown. And maybe the dealer says, now you have no more questions, right? I show you the breakdown of these numbers. Okay. And then in addition, you have to pay monthly leasing payment. All right, and how much is it? The dealer took out the calculator and punched the calculator a few times and came up with this number here, 373.43. Okay, of course, in the real leasing business, you may be aware of something called like a money factor, all these kind of things. Okay, so here, this is what the dealer is asking from you, 373.43. Okay, and the security deposit is refundable at months 24 end. Okay, if everything goes okay. All right. So, and because this is a leasing car, so the dealer says, I don't want you to abuse the car. So you would have to behave in a manner that actually preserves the car value well. All right. So in this case, the dealer says, you guarantee that at the end of the lease, car is going to have a residual value of $13,994. Okay, and that is 57% of the MSRP. All right, if you're going for higher end cars like a Mercedes, then this residual value could be, let's say, 61% of the MSRP. All right, because the car is actually worth a lot more. So the dealer says, I don't want you to abuse the car. Okay, so let's just say this is satisfied. All right, you have been a very good person and you are taking care of the car even though the car is a leasing car. Okay, so let's say this condition is actually not binding. All right, so now let's look at the horizon here. So the horizon is actually for 2 years, 24 months. Okay, so that is 24 months. And the question here is, you want to buy or lease? Okay, all right. Well, there's one more thing I want to copy down here, which is the interest rate. Okay, if you want to buy this car, you go for a car loan, and that's going to be 3%. Okay, so some of you realize that that is really the cost of buying because you're financing the purchase with a 3% bank loan. Okay, all right. So what's the analysis here? So the analysis here again is to compare the leasing option to the buying option. All right, so we need to find the IRR for buying and IRR for leasing. Okay, so earlier, if you look at the computer leasing example, we actually build a timeline and we put this the two options side by side. Okay, so here I'm going to do the same. All right, so I'm going to look at months and I'm going to look at the cash flows from buying and I'm going to look at the cash flows from leasing. Okay, so today is month 0 and this is month 1 and I have a total of 24 months. Okay, so let me just copy down here and make sure I have 24 months. All right, I need 2 more here. Okay, and let's look at the cash flows from buying. So if you want to buy this car, you're going to actually pay 22, all right, negative 22,905. That's the price we actually calculated earlier, and we are saying that at the end of year 3, excuse me, at the end of year 2, the car is actually taken care of very well, and let's say the car price is actually the car residual value is actually, let's say, 15,000. Okay, so if you buy the car, you can actually sell the car in the market for $15,000. That is the residual value of the car. Okay, that's 15,000. So there is a big cash inflow to you if you actually buy the car. Why? Because if you buy the car, at the end of 2 years, you own the car. So now you can actually sell the car in the market for 15,000. So you can actually pocket in this 15,000. So that's a cash inflow. All right. Now, if you actually lease the car, then you pay, 1315. Okay, that is the amount you pay today, and then you pay 373.43 each month. Okay, and you pay the same amount in the following 24 months. So I'm going to lock down these 373.43 here, and I need to copy this down here. All right, and in month 24, well, in month 24, this is the end of the lease. So what happens here is that, remember, you paid 450 and you preserve the car value well, so you can actually get your security deposit back. So here I want to actually add back the 450. Okay, so add back the 450. So if you look at the last period, you actually get a check from the dealer. The dealer says, well, in the last period, you pay 373.43, but I have to refund you the security deposit. So the difference is $76.57. All right. So this is the setup now. So now I should look at the leasing option, and just similar to the previous example, I should look at the differential cash flows. Okay. Remember, you always do the cash flows from leasing minus the cash flows from buying. Okay, so in this case, if you lease, you pay $13.15, but if you buy, you pay $22,905. So if you want to go with the leasing option, that's like you take out a loan of $21,590, and in return, you're gonna pay off this loan by making these payments in the following 2 years. Okay, these are the payments. All right, so the question here is, do you want to take out this loan? All right, so I'm really skipping some notes here, but really this is regarding the interpretation of the differential cash flows. All right, so if you're willing to lease, okay, I'm repeating myself here. If you're willing to lease, that is like you're willing to take out a loan of $21,590, and in return, you're going to pay off this loan in the following 2 years by making these payments, okay, each of the following 24 months. All right, so I'm going to look at, hey, what's the IRR of the differential cash flows? Okay, I want to get a sense of how expensive is this loan. So I can actually do the IRR function here again. All right, and I'm taking all these cash flows here, and notice that the cash flows only flip signs once, so we're good. We have at most one IRR, and this is actually showing up as 0, but you need to actually bring back the decimals. Okay, 0.44%. All right, so that is the IRR, and now I can actually say what is the APR of leasing, and that's going to be equal to, all right, I take the IRR, this is the monthly rate, and I'm going to multiply this by 12 because you're actually paying monthly. All right, and then I can actually look at IRR of leasing. So that's going to be effective function here applied again, and I'm taking the APR, I'm putting down 12 here for the compounding frequency parameter, and that's going to be 5.38%. All right, so now what is the IRR of buying? Well, you have the APR of buying, that's 3%. So if I want to get the IRR for buying, I put down 3% here, and I want to actually look at the same frequency so that we're not bothered, or we're not affected by the different compounding frequencies. Okay, so the IRR for buying is actually 3.04%. So conclusion, what should you do? Well, it's actually much cheaper for you to buy it. Okay, all right, so you should actually buy the car. And you can actually look at the if function here again and try to model this by using the if function. Okay, I would leave that to you. All right, and I want to actually give you an ad hoc problem here, homework here. Okay, So you know that in this example, if the car is actually worth $15,000, if you buy it, if you keep it, for 2 years, all right, well, you can actually sell it for, 15,000. All right, and this actually makes the buying option very, very attractive because you spend only 22,905, and you can actually get back $15,000 in 2 years. That's a lot of money. All right, that's why the buying option is actually so cheap. It's actually cheaper than leasing. Okay, so my question is, at what residual value in 2 years will you be indifferent between buying versus leasing? Okay, so in other words, if the car is actually not worth 15,000, if it is worth 14,000, are you still willing to buy it? If it is worth only, let's say, 8,000, are you still willing to buy it? All right, so I want you to find out what is the residual value in 2 years that will make you feel indifferent between buying versus leasing. Okay, and I'm going to give you a little hint here. All right, guess the residual value in 2 years. Okay, and calculate the difference between IRR for buying and the IRR for leasing. Okay, and then invoke solver. All right, set the difference equal to 0 by changing the guess. Okay, so if you do that, you should actually be able to find the residual value in 2 years that will actually make you feel indifferent. All right, so I will leave that to yourself. Okay, and this really concludes chapter 3. And just to summarize, we are looking at IRR, APR, EAR, and its applications. The first application is for mortgage. So we have to find very powerful tool of calculating the true cost of the mortgages, and that number, that concept is called EAR. And then we can also apply this to leasing versus buying analysis. All right, we're actually we're having a way of translating the leasing option into into some kind of differential cash flows or some kind of a loan, and we actually can calculate the cost of leasing by looking at the EAR of the differential cash flows. All right, so that's what I have. I'll stop right here, and you have some interesting homework problems to practice, and I do have videos for you to for you to watch if you get stuck. All right.